Well, good Monday afternoon. Beautiful day here. Sunny, warm. See what we got for a temp out there. 66 degrees outside, 60 inside, not quite as warm. But the thermometer is actually out in the sun, so that does make a difference. The sunshine is very, very warm today. The yard has been holding up very well this spring for being able to get customers in and out of here, so that's been kind of a blessing. I was concerned with all the snow we had and how fast it started melting that we were going to have issues. So far, it's been great. 2003 F250 5.4 liter 2-valve. Right hand has gasket is leaking oil. And as you can see, we've got the grill and the headlight support and all of that stuff taken off. It's just way easier than trying to climb up and over it. And it doesn't really take that long to get that stuff off there. It speeds the job up, in my opinion anyway. So we're going to go ahead and dive into this thing and get it ripped apart. I did notice I just took the belt off. Gonna need one of them. Gonna need one of them as well. But that's not unusual. Let's get into it. Some of these water pumps that have been on there for a while don't like to come off, so we usually have to take and clean up around that lip there. For that, I'm going to use a roll-lock disc. And many times, if it's not too badly rusted, which this one was not, many times it'll pop. It's like so. You can get them off without taking that ridge off there, but it's going to make it much easier if you just go ahead and clean that off. Some of the things you just learn over a number of years doing it. Some of these things I like to be able to put the bolts back in them. Because I'm working in a one-bay shop, and this vehicle will be going back outside once it's taken apart. That way the head can go off to the machine shop. So we've tried to put as many things in the back as we can, so that way, in this case, it's got a topper on, or tonneau cover, or whatever. If it's an open bed, then I'll find a place for them inside, but this way they stay with the vehicle. And if the head has to go off to the machine shop, we can pull this back outside, out of the way, and bring in another one. There's some plastic fasteners on here, and this thing's it's 20 years old. It's got a little bit of a few miles on it. It hasn't quite made 200 yet, but it's definitely not the same as years ago when we were doing these under warranty. The rust factor is definitely much more prominent now. As you can see, some of these don't like to cooperate real well. Yeah, force the socket down onto the rust. Try to get it to grip a little bit. And you can make a mental note on some of this stuff. Most of this stuff, I've done it enough times that I don't have to label or put most of the bolts back in the holes. Some of those projects, if you've never done them before, it's a good idea to thread some of those bolts back into the holes so you know where they go. I've done this enough times that I don't need to do that number. I can go there. This. I would say that bearing is roasty toasty in that one. Okay, one nice thing about removing this front end is now you can stand here in between your radiator support there, your front axle and steering here. You can climb right in and stand there. It gives you kind of a decent vantage point, or decent access to being able to get in here and work. A little bit more convenient than laying over the front of the vehicle and all of those things. So I'll go ahead and take the throttle return spring off. These older ones, you got to be a little bit careful with this cruise control. Those are susceptible to cracking if you aren't careful. Let's see here. Take our breather tube off the top of the valve cover. Maybe she might be a little argumentative. We'll leave that for the moment. As you can hear, my the chickens are out. I've let them out to free range and clean up early bugs that are coming up out of the ground. There's a lot of water bugs and stuff already, which is kind of different for this time of the year, but I suppose a lot of the birds are coming back and stuff anyway, so I'm surprised I can't get that. We'll have to put a wrench on that. Oh, we need a couple other tools anyway, so that's the one bad part. When I used to, when I ran a service cart, I would always pull my service cart up right back here and I'd be able to rummage through and grab everything. I could pull that over here, but it's a little bit of a pain because I have some shims underneath the front wheels to keep it from tipping forward and the drawers from wanting to migrate their way out. So we'll just hop out and grab a couple more tools. 8mm swivel socket, 10mm gear wrench. Just gonna give it a quick look here. We're probably gonna grab that for good measure. That is a push pin tool. Has that kind of an end on it. Well, it's been, I've modified the end of it. So, just taking a quick look here, see what else we might need. Go in here. We'll get that pick. We'll get that pick. We'll climb back in here and see if we can get something done. My old shop stool that I had when I worked at the Ford garage, I had actually found that you could, with a couple pieces of blocking, I could set my shop stool in here, and instead of having to stand on the floor, I could sit on the stool and work under in this engine compartment as well. So traditionally, when I would take these things apart and I would have them in the shop, and I didn't have any plan for the vehicle to go back outside, all of the cowl up here makes a great organizer for bolts, because you have all the little slots and all the little trays up here that you can set your bolts and stuff in. It works out quite nicely, actually. However, because this vehicle will most likely be going back outside, I'm 90% certain of that, we will be putting all of the fasteners in a magnetic tray. Oh, come on. Oh. The challenges with these older vehicles, I tell you. So my problem here is, if you can see that flexing, that's a plastic intake manifold. And I don't want to replace the manifold if I don't have to. Doesn't look like it's leaking or anything like that. We're probably going to end up with some challenges getting a lot of these coil bolts out as well. It looks like we'll hopefully not be breaking those off, but one battle at a time here. So we'll get you over here, kind of give you a better vantage point maybe. You can see the bolt that I'm on and how much that's flexing the intake manifold. I'm going to go ahead and grab the intake. With a pair of pliers and try to stabilize it a little bit so we aren't just breaking out a big chunk of the intake without at least trying to get around that. Oh boy. For how much that thing's deflecting, that's not looking like a good alternative. Okay, well, plan B, we can take and pull these cables out. And take those out. Now this makes things a little bit more challenging even. Didn't mean to blind you there. This makes things more challenging in the disassembly department. That bolt's going to be a little bit harder to get to, the one that holds the throttle body on. I do need to get the throttle body off so I have room to lift the intake up and out. This being here is going to create a challenge because, as you can see, as far as this nests down in there, I have to be able to raise the intake a ways to be able to come out and back to myself. So I'm still not 100% sure what I'm going to do there, but I'm relatively confident that that bolt is going to break off. I may elect to look at some of these other ones, these other fasteners, and see how many of those will come out. And we might have to make a educated assumption here, how many of these will actually, if we have a whole bunch of them that will not come out, and not just a couple, then it becomes more cost effective to just replace the intake manifold than spend hours and hours and hours trying to get this one, the bolts out of every one of these holes. So Let's just see here. That one crack loose. Oh, sure. Like how the camera just shuts off on you? That's real good. I like that too. Not even a little bit. Okay. I can see said socket, but I can't get to said socket. Looks like we'll be climbing out to get ourselves a magnet. These flexible magnets are invaluable for some of this stuff. The conventional telescoping magnets are great, but if you need a good all-around magnet, make sure you buy a good one though, because if they're not very rigid, they need to be flexible yet rigid. I know the cheap ones from the Harbor Freight and stuff that I've used before aren't the best in the world. So we'll see how many of these fasteners here want to come undone. And this is why we grab pick tools. This is where patience becomes an absolute virtue. In these situations, you're going to break a lot of connectors if you don't have the patience to get them apart. Years of dust and dirt and debris and all that stuff get plugged up in these things and make them really hard to get apart. You'll have a much higher success rate if you're patient, or you'll sell customers a lot of parts if you don't have a lot of patience. But I guess that's for to each their own, as they say. Connector off. See how many of these actually want to cooperate with me here. Makes it easier if we can just pull these things out of the way. Now we have our okay. We got injectors unplugged, coils unplugged. We're gonna go ahead and see how many of these coil bolts will actually come loose. And since we're in the mood, we'll see if this bolt back here will actually come loose or not. That one appears to be cooperative. So again, we can tuck over here on the fender, kind of out of the way. So I'm looking down in here, I can already see one really large challenge that we're going to face. Oh boy. I've seen some of these that are bad, but I've not seen too many that are this bad. Good job, Rick. Here goes the... Huh. See if we can go fishing with the magnet, shall we? It's not on the floor. It's on the leaf spring and the sway bar. Now it's on the floor. I don't think I can get it now. The magnet's the other way. I'm getting my exercise in, climbing in and out of the engine compartment of this thing. Maybe it was going to be more efficient to pull the toolbox over here. Alright, well, if we get down in here with the GoPro, and I'm just going to pop these clips off real quick. At least try to. I got one off. That was what I was in the act of doing when I dropped the treble light. It's much more difficult to do with one hand than holding the camera, but so I've seen some spring lock connectors that are pretty rusted in there. However, that one is looking about as bad as they get. We're going to have some serious challenges trying to get those spring lock connectors and fuel lines apart. I have in the past had to pull the fuel rail off and leave the fuel rail in the vehicle. However, it is very difficult to work around when you have to do that. So, and then again, it matters if these bolts here will come out because they pass through, and the threads are usually good and rusty on the far side. So we got a lot of challenges here, guys. Just a lot of challenges. That's the nut for the EGR tube. This has had exhaust manifolds put on it not that long ago, so that nut was actually pretty darn easy to get off. If not, I would have used my induction heater and the flexible wrap, and we could have put that on there and got that off. So now, maybe we can actually get to some coil bolts and see if those will come loose or not, shall we? That might be fun. Gonna need 2 hands for this. The head of these bolts is good and rusty and not quite 7mm anymore, so that will crack loose. The other challenge I face on these swivel sockets is getting that bolt back out after we've put some torque on it. You usually gotta pry it back and forth a little bit. See if we can get onto another one here. That one's not quite as rusted. A little easier to work with. Six more to go. All right, well, it didn't take long to find ourselves in some more problems here. That far bolt on the end of that little swivel socket, you can see that one, it doesn't want to come out. And the problem is that is the bolt, the boss that the bolt goes into, that little brass insert that's knurled into that plastic. And usually it'll either crack that plastic and start spinning that knurl, and in some cases it'll just snap the bolt off. Usually either way, they're almost impossible to avoid breaking that plastic or the bolt, because you can't heat it. If you try at all to heat that, the plastic becomes soft before the bolt releases from the knurling, or the bolt releases from the collar, and it just becomes a bigger mess. So can't use heat here. If you guys have any prior other experience that you've had trying to get those things out, you let me know. I know people have, and I've seen people, not myself. In this case, this is more than likely going to getting an intake, just because that's how the cookie crumbles. But we're going to go over to this side and start working on some of those as well. But if you guys got any experience and better methods, I'm certainly willing to learn. I just haven't found any in all the years that I've been doing it so far. So, but again, if you got tips or tricks, I'm all ears. So we'll get the PCB line out of the way for this side and start doing the same with connectors and coil bolts, and try to get the coils out of here. We have to get the coils out in order to be able to remove the intake as well. So it's just part of the process on this thing, and it's going to take a little while. All right, well, as you can see, progress so far. We got the throttle body removed, and we got 3 more coils removed on this right side, but that one back here basically has no hex left to it. So we're gonna have our challenges there. So both through the 2 back coils are essentially stuck. Keep plugging away. Well, I was able to remove that one with this. You can see there's not much left of the head of that thing. But these little twist extractors, power extractors they call them. These ones were made by Matco. I used to buy a lot of stuff from Matco back in the day when our Matco guy was a local distributor. We haven't had one since he quit, so the things that I have that aren't broken, I use. Everything else I have since phased out and moved to Mac Tools with, so that's just reality. So now we have 7 of 8. We're going to try on this driver's side back here. We're going to try real hard not to break that one off. I think I can work around this even if I do end up breaking it. Some quick measurements. There's no way I can get this intake manifold out of here with this piece on. It just won't, it won't come up high enough, but we got some ideas. But first we're going to see about that bolt back there, and we'll decide what our plan is. Okay, well, I don't know how much you're going to be able to see in here as we try to get this bolt out. Let's see if we can get you in a better spot. But there are no guarantees here that you get to see what I get to see, because I can't see what the camera sees, and I'm trying not to break this thing off, so I don't have good feelings about it. But we have a straight socket, 6-inch extension. We're going to try to put some pressure on it. Now, I know people, we can talk about penetrating oil here in a minute, but just bear with me here and we'll explain why we're not going that route, but this one doesn't feel good. There's no free movement in it. So just light, steady pressure, just enough to make it turn. Try not to gull it in there. And like that, we actually got that one out. So I'm pretty happy about that. right, well, we have all 8 of the coil bolts out, and we'll talk about why we didn't use penetrating oil. First of all, you can see that little bit of an umbrella flare on the head of that bolt would keep it from, it would just shed it off anyway. Additionally, if you look at these inserts, and this one up here, it's going to be the same principle. This one up here is a little easier to see. And we'll go to high beam so it quits strobing on you. If you use penetrating oil, this little knurling here around the edges, it's really susceptible to soaking that in there and actually breaking the bond between the knurling and the plastic itself. And once you get that oil into that plastic, it's slippery and you start turning that knurling and you have a whole nother problem. And then you're trying to pry that knurling up as you turn it to get it out of there. So in my experience, you're better off to go that route. These can be drilled, but it's a little bit of a pain because they're so small. But I have had success with drilling ones that have been broken off before. The biggest problem is like on these, you can, if it cracks out the plastic along this edge and that knurling breaks free, then there really isn't much you can do about it. But that, guys, is just part of this job, these older vehicles, and this is why a lot of these places, especially depending on how they're paying their mechanics, don't want to work on this stuff that's over 10 years old, because in the Midwest, they're just figuring they're getting to that point where the profit line isn't there for them. I work on them. I feel like I can make a living at it. Have an honest conversation with your customer. Make a video if you need to and explain to them why it's doing these things and why it costs so much money to repair them, but replacement costs are also astronomical too, so it's a better alternative. I think we're going to wrap this one up here. I got a lot more challenges with this one, but it's going to get into way too long of a video if I don't. So like and subscribe, comment, and share. If you know somebody that's struggling, working on these things, or if you think they'd like the content, share it out to them. I'm going to get plugging away, and on the next episode, we'll get into removing the bolts that hold the intake itself in and the fuel lines that hold the, or the retainers that hold the fuel lines to the injector rail. And then we'll see how far we can get after that. You guys have a good one. We'll see you next time.